very glad to see so many people here. I know a lot of you have had this date in your diary for a long time because you've been wound up by Rachel not to miss it. And the rest of you have been wound up by Brook Festival. And I'm very, very grateful. The festival's been going for 5 years. The idea was to have something for people who love books and who live locally. And so far it's so good. But I think this evening is going to be something slightly different. And if anything, the best of new departures. Rachel has been working on this book for a very long time. It is, for those who love poetry, it's a spin-off from an app which she created. You can go onto a telephone or an iPad and find great actors reading poetry, or you can, as is much more enjoyable, come to the bush and hear them. We have Julian and Isla Blair, who are both going to perform. You've got one more guest coming later. What I need to say before I bang on any more about the particular performance is that if there is a fire drill, it's not a fire drill. You all have to run through the doors, find the fire exits, and just leave. The second thing I have to do is thank our sponsors, Finley Brewer, who are estate agents, and also the ushers tonight. And the third thing I have to do is say, please welcome Rachel, Julian, and Allie.
Thank you, Susanna, for those very kind words. I'm Rachel Kay. As Susanna said, I created a poetry app about a year ago with my partner, Allie Esiri, and we've now jointly edited our poetry anthology together. Allie came to me, she was a whiz with her iPad, and she came to me because she knew that poetry meant an awful lot to me. I think it started when I was quite young. I loved poetry as a child. It is a children's poetry anthology, and it is a children's poetry app. And then what happened was, as I grew up, really my mother got me used to the idea that a poem could be your friend in a time of need. And the very first poem that my mother gave me was by someone called Louis MacNeice, and it's called Apple Blossom. And I was suffering from a broken heart, and it's got this wonderful line. It said, the first blossom was the last blossom for the child that had never seen an orchard. And this was revelatory to me. This was extraordinary to me. I felt as if Louis MacNeice was sort of speaking to me, because I felt like I would never see an orchard, and that would never really live again. And Louis MacNeice was my friend in times of trouble. So anyway, I grew up, and I didn't really think that much about poetry, but nonetheless, I kind of developed a pattern with friends, which is that friends would send me poems when things happened to them, and I'd send them poems when things happened to me, or in response to things that were happening. And this kind of pattern continued. And then I really basically became really much more obsessed by poetry because I became quite ill with depression. And my mother was looking after me. My mother, sadly, is not here tonight, but she's an incredible lover of poetry and an incredible influencer. And I was ill in bed, and she said, I'm going to read you this poem, and it was by George Herbert, and it's called Love, and it's in our anthology because I think it can speak to an adult, but it can speak to a child. And I recommend you read it, look it up or whatever. And the first line is, love bade me welcome, but my soul drew back, guilty of dust and sin. I'm not going to read the whole poem, because we've got experts to read poems. But to me, the description of guilty of dust and sin perfectly described how I was feeling. And the notion that love could bid me welcome, and that love could be this compassionate voice, and that I could turn to love, was really, again, an extraordinary moment for me. So ever since, I have been very, very interested in poetry and very obsessed with poetry, and this notion that poetry can help you in dark times. And since I've been involved with poetry and I've done the app and I've co-edited the book, as I say, with my partner, I've now started going into prisons with poetry. I've been going into schools with poetry. And of course, there are many ways to enjoy poetry, and I'm not saying that the sort of value of poetry in hard times is the only value of poetry. But I just wanted to mention that to you, because that was really why poetry spoke so much to me. Good, so that's really a little bit about me and why I've got so involved with poetry. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this evening, and I'm going to just introduce our guests, and then we're in the hands of the experts. So, Isla and Julian very kindly agreed to come along tonight. They're going to read as a sort of double act. They're a husband and wife team, as you probably know. They're going to read around 10 poems each, and they're very kindly also going to tell us a little bit about why they chose the poems and why these poems mean so much to them, a bit like I've been saying to you why poetry has meant a lot to me. Without more ado, let me tell you a little bit about Julian and Isla. The other thing I meant to say is that the evening is in aid of Save the Children, and also a local literacy charity, volunteer reading help, so we can all feel good about that as well. So let me tell you finally a little bit Isla and Julian. So Julian, I think is very relevant to say, is probably, well, he's known for many things, a very distinguished Shakespearean actor, as indeed is Isla. They both trained with the Royal Shakespeare Company and performed for really many, many years in all the important Shakespearean roles. And of course, you can't really talk about poetry without talking about Shakespeare, so they really couldn't be better placed to be here tonight reading poems for us. In addition, both have had distinguished film and television careers. Julian, as you probably all know, is best known probably, well, one of the things he's known for, being a Bond baddie. It's very important to me that we've got Skyfall, and many other things beside. The final thing I want to say is that Isla is going to read to us and with Julian, and then halfway through she's going to also tell you a little bit about her own book, and why it's so important to her, and why she felt passionately that she wanted to be here tonight, and she wanted to support a literacy charity. So I give you Isla.
Thank you. It seems appropriate when the nights are drawing in, as they say, and the clocks went back last week, to start with a poem that talks about nostalgia, I suppose, and I don't know, reflection. And this is a lovely poem by Helen Fielding, and it's called It Was Long Ago. I'll tell you something, shall I? That I remember. Something that still means a great deal to me. It was long ago. A dusty road in summer, I remember. A mountain and an old house and a tree that stood, you know, behind the house. An old woman, I remember, in a red shawl with a grey cat on her knee, humming under a tree. She seemed the oldest thing I can remember, but then perhaps I was not more than 3. It was long ago. I dragged on the dusty road, and I remember how the old woman looked over the fence at me and seemed to know how it felt to be 3, and called out, I remember, "Do you like bilberries and cream for tea?" I went under the tree, and while she hummed and the cat purred, I remember how she filled a saucer with berries and cream for me so long ago. Such berries and such cream, I remember, I had never seen before and never see today, you know. And that is almost all I can remember. The house, the mountain, the grey cat on her knee, her red shawl and the tree, and the taste of the berries and the feel of the sun, I remember, and the smell of everything that used to be so long ago. Till the heat on the road outside again, I remember, and how the long, dusty road seemed to have me, for me, no end, you know. That is the farthest I can remember. It won't mean much to you. It does to me. Then I grew up, you see.
Listen, we know we're brilliant. Clap at the end, if that's all right, otherwise we'll be here all night. As you'll have seen already, a lot of these poems are especially about children or for children, but this one particularly is, and I'm so glad to see you three girls here, young girls, because you'd understand this one. It's called Dear Mum, by someone called Brian Patton, very fine poet. Dear Mum, while you were out, a cup went and broke itself. A crack appeared in the blue vase your great-great-granddad brought back from China. Somehow, without me even turning on the tap, the sink mysteriously overflowed. A strange jam stain, about the size of a boy's hand, appeared on the kitchen wall. I don't think we will ever discover exactly how the cat managed to turn on the washing machine, especially from the inside, or how Sissy's pet rabbit went and mistook the waste disposal unit for a burrow. Also, I know the canary looks grubby, but it took ages getting it out of the vacuum cleaner. I was being good, honest. But I think the house is haunted. So, knowing you're going to have a fit, I've gone over to Gran's for a bit.
This is another kind of cautionary tale. Well, that wasn't a cautionary tale, but this is, and I'm sure you all know this one. Matilda Who Told Lies. Matilda told such dreadful lies, it made one gasp and stretch one's eyes. Her aunt, who from her earliest youth had kept a strict regard for truth, attempted to believe Matilda. The effort very nearly killed her, and would have done so had not she discovered this infirmity. For once, towards the close of day, Matilda, growing tired of play, and finding she was left alone, went tiptoe to the telephone, and summoned the immediate aid of London's noble fire brigade. Within an hour, the gallant band were pouring in on every hand, from Putney, Hackney Downs and Bow, with courage high and hearts aglow, they galloped, roaring through the town, "Matilda's house is burning down!" Inspired by British cheers and loud proceeding from the frenzied crowd, they ran their ladders through a score of windows on the ballroom floor, and took peculiar pains to souse the pictures up and down the house, until Aunt Matilda's aunt succeeded in showing them they were not needed, and even then she had to pay to get the men to go away. It happened that a few weeks later, her aunt went off to the theatre to see that interesting play, The Second Mrs. Tanqueray. She had refused to take her niece to hear this entertaining piece, a deprivation just and wise, to punish her for telling lies. That night, a fire did break out. You should have heard Matilda shout. You should have heard her scream and bawl and throw the window up and call to people passing in the street. The rapidly increasing heat encouraged her to obtain their confidence, but all in vain. For every time she shouted, "Fire!" they only answered, "Little liar." And therefore, when her aunt returned, Matilda and the house were burned.
That was written by Hilaire Belloc, of course, at the end of the last century, century before last, my God. 2000s now, aren't we? And the modern poet, Wendy Cope, thought this was a wonderful verse form, and she has written her own cautionary tale, as they were called. This is Kenneth, who was too fond of bubble gum and met an untimely end. They always have untimely ends in these cautionary tales. The chief defect of Kenneth Plum was chewing too much bubble gum. He chewed away with all his might, morning, evening, noon and night. Even, oh, it makes you weep, blowing bubbles in his sleep. He simply couldn't get enough. His face was covered with the stuff. As for his teeth, what a sight! It was a wonder he could bite. His loving mother and his dad both remonstrated with the lad. Ken repaid them for the trouble by blowing yet another bubble. 'Twas no joke. It isn't funny spending all your pocket money on the day's supply of gum. Sometimes Kenny felt quite glum. As he grew, so did his need. There seemed no limit to his greed. At 10, he often put away 97 packs a day. Then, at last, he went too far. Sitting in his father's car, stuffing gum without a pause, found that he had jammed his jaws. He nudged his dad and pointed to the mouthful that he couldn't chew. "Well, spit it out if you can't chew it." Ken shook his head. He couldn't do it. Before long, he began to groan. The gum was solid as a stone. Dad took him to a builder's yard. They couldn't help, it was too hard. They called a doctor, and he said, "This silly boy will soon be dead. His mouth's so full of bubble gum, no nourishment can reach his tongue." Remember, Ken, and please do not go buying too much you-know-what.
This poem is by Rudyard Kipling. I'm very interested in it because he shared a background that I have actually. I was a part of the tail end of the British Raj in India, and Rudyard Kipling was too, as you know. This is called The Smuggler's Song. If you wake at midnight and hear a horse's feet, don't go drawing back the blind or looking in the street. Them that ask no questions isn't told a lie. Watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by. 25 ponies trotting through the dark. Brandy for the parson, baccy for the clerk. Laces for a lady, letters for a spy. And watch the wall, my darling, while the gentlemen go by. Running round the woodlump, if you chance to find little barrels roped and tarred, all full of brandy wine. Don't you shout to come and look, nor use them for your play. Put the brushwood back again, and they'll be gone next day. If you see the stable door setting open wide, if you see a tired horse lying down inside, if your mother mends a coat cut about and tore, if the lining's wet and warm, don't you ask no more. If you meet King George's men, dressed in blue and red, you be careful what you say and mindful what is said. If they call you pretty maid and chuck you neath the chin, don't you tell where no one is, nor yet where no one's been. Knocks and footsteps round the house, whistles after dark. You've no call for running out till the house dogs bark. Trustees here, and pinchers here, and see how dumb they lie. They don't fret to follow when the gentlemen go by. If you do as you've been told, likely there's a chance you'll be give a dainty doll all the way from France, with a cap of Valenciennes, with the velvet hood, a present from the gentleman, along a being good. 25 ponies trotting through the dark, brandy for the parson, baccy for the clerk. Them that asks no questions isn't told no lie. Watch the wall, my darling, as the gentlemen go by.
This poem is called Us Two. It's by A. Milne, and it's written by Christopher Robin, who you may remember had great adventures in the 100-acre wood with his teddy bear, Pooh. When I was a little boy, I had a teddy bear which I was given when I was 2. And when I had to go to school at the age of about 12, my parents, away to school, my parents went and looked at the school and looked at all the bedrooms and saw that there were toys on the bed. And they realized that it would be okay for me, because although I was 12, I still had my Ted. He was called Ted, but this one's called Pooh. Wherever I am, there's always Pooh. There's always Pooh and me. Whatever I do, he wants to do. Where are you going today, says Pooh. Well, that's very odd, because I was too. Let's go together, says Pooh, says he. Let's go together, says Pooh. What's twice 11? I said to Pooh. Twice what? Said Pooh to me. I think it ought to be 22. Just what I think myself, said Pooh. It wasn't an easy sum to do, but that's what it is, said Pooh, said he. That's what it is, said Pooh. Let's look for dragons, I said to Pooh. Yes, let's, said Pooh to me. We crossed the river and found a few. Yes, those are dragons all right, said Pooh. As soon as I saw their beaks, I knew that's what they were, said Pooh, said he. That's what they were, said Pooh. Let's frighten the dragons, I said to Pooh. That's right, said Pooh to me. I'm not afraid, I said to Pooh. And I held his paw, and I shouted, shoo, silly old dragons, and off they flew. I wasn't afraid, said Pooh, said he. I'm never afraid with you. So wherever I am, there's always Pooh. There's always Pooh and me. What would I do, I said to Pooh, if it wasn't for you? And Pooh said, true. It isn't much fun for one, but two can stick together, says Pooh, says he. That's how it is, said Pooh.
There are lots of little girls, I'm sure, who are very fond of ponies, riding ponies. I don't know if you ride ponies. Do you ride any horses? Do you? Yeah, do you like them? I bet you do. I actually have to say I wasn't one of the little girls that liked horses. Ever since I was sort of unceremoniously unseated by my dad's horse Durban. But this little girl in this poem, Hunter Trials, likes them very much indeed.
It's awfully bad luck on Diana. Her ponies have swallowed their bits. She fished down their throats with a spanner and frightened them all into fits. So now she's attempting to borrow. Do lend her some bits, Mummy, do. I'll lend her my own for tomorrow, but today I'll be wanting them too. Just look at Prunella on Guzzle, the wizardest pony on earth. Why doesn't she slacken his muzzle and tighten the breech on his girth? I say, Mummy, there's Mrs. Geezer. Doesn't she look pretty sick? I bet it's because Mona Lisa was hit on the hop with a brick. Miss Blewett says Monica threw it, but Monica says it was Joan, and Joan's very thick with Miss Blewett, so Monica's sulking alone. And Margaret failed in her paces, her withers got tied in a noose, so her coronet's caught in the traces, and now all her fetlocks are loose. Oh, it's me now. I'm terribly nervous. I wonder if Smudges will shy. She's practically certain to swerve as her pelham is over one eye. Oh, wasn't it naughty of Smudges? Oh, Mummy, I'm sick with disgust. She threw me in front of the judges, and my silly old collarbones bust.
This is a poem by Lord Byron, which I'm sure a lot of you will know. And he wrote it in response to, he went to a party and he saw a girl. Byron was always seeing girls. He saw this beautiful girl with very black hair and a beautiful long dress covered in spangles. And he was completely overwhelmed by her. As far as we know, he didn't follow it up, but he wrote this immediately after the party. She walks in beauty, like the night of cloudless climes and starry skies, and all that's best of dark and bright meet in her aspect and her eyes, thus mellowed to that tender light which heaven to gaudy day denies. One shade the more, one ray the less, had half impaired the nameless grace which waves in every raven tress, or softly lightens o'er her face, where thoughts serenely sweet express how pure, how dear their dwelling place. And on that cheek and o'er that brow, so soft, so calm, yet eloquent, the smiles that win, the tints that glow, but tell of days in goodness spent, a mind at peace with all below, a heart whose love is innocent.
I wanted to tell you a little bit about, not really just about the book I've written, but it's something that I held as a secret to myself for a long time. As I mentioned, I was born in India, in Kerala, down in South India, where my father and my grandfather were tea planters. And as was the custom with all the people who were part of the kind of British Raj, I suppose, they sent their children home, they went home to be educated, to get a good education. And I was one of them. My sister was 10 and I was not quite 6 when I got sent to a boarding school in Scotland. Must have been very hard for my parents, I have to think, but anyway, leaving us behind. I wasn't very happy at the school where I was in Scotland, but it was my good fortune that it got closed down when I was not quite 12. Because it was discovered, the Ministry of Education actually closed it down because it was discovered that there were virtually no qualified teachers in the school. This was just one. And so it came as no surprise really to anybody when I went to my secondary school, which was very happy. I went to a very lovely school in West Sussex called West Preston Manor, boarding school again. But I was holding this terrible secret to my heart that nobody knew about except my sister, my older sister Fiona. But it was discovered on my second day. We were doing reading and writing class, and the girls were all taking it in turns to read round the class. And we were reading, I remember, from Lorna Doone. And I thought, what am I going to do? It's going to be my turn in a minute. And everybody will know, because what I knew and had known for years was that I couldn't read. And there I was nearly 12, and I couldn't read. So I stood up and I made up the story of Lorna Doone as I thought it was going to turn out. And of course all the girls laughed and I started to cry, and luckily there was a completely wonderful teacher in my class called Miss Evans who said, "Sit down, Isla. You're a brave girl, but you must be a frightened girl because you can't read, can you?" I said, "No, miss, I can't." And what was fantastic about Miss Evans was that she got all the girls on side with me and she said, "I think we'll help her, won't we, girls? That's what we'll do." So every break time and every lunch time, when the girls had a moment, their spare time, they would very kindly take me through the Janet and John books that they, of course, left behind years before. And it wasn't very long before I was reading and couldn't stop reading. And it's kind of strange that I use words in a way as tools of my trade. I feel very, very passionately about literacy. I work for the Lord Mayor of London's campaign, literacy campaign, because ironically, my parents, thinking that they were doing the right thing for me by sending me home for good education, where I left Kerala in India, they have 94% literacy. And I discovered when I was working for the Lord Mayor of London's literacy campaign that in inner London, 1 in 4 children leave primary school at the age of 11 unable to read. And I was one of them. And I'm not dyslexic and I'm not stupid. I just hadn't found the key. Somebody hadn't given me the key to unlock whatever door it was that was able to enable me to walk into this wonderful world of books. So I feel very passionately, and my book is, I've bought a few copies of my book over there, which mentions my reading thing and mentions my early life in India. It's only not about my career, it's just about my early life in India. And if anybody buys it, the proceeds are going to volunteer reading help, which is one of the charities that you're very kindly supporting here tonight. So that's really what I wanted to say about that. It took me years to confess that I couldn't read, but I can't stop talking about it now. I'm going to read now a poem with great cheek, really, because for many, many years I went round the world with Derek Jacobi in a sort of 2-person show about the life of Lord Byron. Derek was Lord Byron, of course, and I played all his kind of significant ladies, and whom there were many. And I used to listen every night to Derek reading this poem, and I can't read it a quarter as well as he can, but it's my favourite poem, really, I think, in the world, and I've asked Derek to read it at my funeral. It's called We'll Go No More A-Roving. So, we'll go no more a-roving, so late into the night, though the heart be still as loving, and the moon be still as bright. For the sword outwears its sheath, and the soul wears out the breast, and the heart must pause to breathe, and love itself have rest. Though the night was made for loving, and the day returns too soon, yet we'll go no more a-roving by the light of the moon.
William Shakespeare, as we know, wrote many sonnets, 154. Some of them are rather difficult to read. They're all so wonderfully profound. Some are very easy to read. And my favourite is one which is very easy to read, and I think is a favourite of many other people too. It has the famous line in it, well, everything Shakespeare writes has famous lines in it, Darling Buds of May, which some of you will remember the television series called that. And it entirely fulfills the last line of the poem, so long lives this, and this gives life to thee, meaning that the love, this person, will live forever and ever and ever. When he wrote this poem, he believed it, and the fact that I'm standing up here tonight in 2012, reading it aloud, means that his prophecy came true. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate. Rough winds do shake the darling buds of May, and summer's lease hath all too short a date. Sometime too hot the eye of heaven shines, and often is his gold complexion dimmed, and every fair from fair sometimes declines, by chance or nature's changing course untrimmed. But thy eternal summer shall not fade, nor lose possession of that fair thou owest, nor shall death brag thou wanderest in his shade, when in eternal lines to time thou growest. So long as men can breathe, or eye can see, so long live this, and this gives life to thee.
This poem's a short poem about friendship, by Elizabeth Jennings. Such love I cannot analyze. It does not rest in lips or eyes, neither in kisses nor caress. Partly I know its gentleness and understanding in one word, or in brief letters, is preserved by trust and by respect and awe. These are the words I'm feeling for. Two people, yes, two lasting friends. The giving comes, the taking ends. There is no measure for such things. For this all nature slows and sings.
This, you'll all have read Wind in the Willows, will you? And this is a poem written by Ratty, that man who so adored the river he could never live anywhere else. All along the backwater, through the rushes tall, ducks are a-dabbling, up tails all. Ducks' tails, drakes' tails, yellow feet a-quiver, yellow bills all out of sight, busy in the river. Slushy green undergrowth where the roach swim, here we keep our larder, cool and full and dim. Everyone for what he likes. We like to be heads down, tails up, dabbling free. High in the blue above, swift swirl and call. We are down a-dabbling, up tails all.
It's another poem about a donkey. I love donkeys, and I think they're so abused all around the world. But there's a wonderful donkey charity actually called Brook. I don't know if you know it, but it's well worth looking at their website because it's lovely. Anyway, well, it's not lovely because it's very unhappy. The poor donkey's not very happy. When fishes flew and forests walked and figs grew upon thorn, some moment when the moon was blood, then surely I was born, with monstrous head and sickening cry, and ears like errant wings, the devil's walking parody on all four-footed things. The tattered outlaw of the earth, of ancient crooked will, starve, scourge, deride me, I am dumb, I keep my secret still. Fools! For I also had my hour, one far fierce hour and sweet,
There was a shout about my ears and palms beneath my feet.
We each have 3 more poems.
No,
Have you got
we're
enough
not.
time
We're
for
not.
them?
We're going to stop after my next one.
My next
Otherwise, who wears the trousers?
Means I can't do my favourite one. This is another favourite one, of course. It's called Adelstrop, and it's written by Edward Thomas just before the Second World War. And he wasn't to know that the war was actually going to happen, and although things were getting very tight indeed and very menacing all over Europe. But this happened. He was in a train, a local train, and the train suddenly stopped in the middle of the countryside at a small country station. Yes, I remember Adelstrop, the name, because one afternoon of heat, the express train drew up there unwontedly. It was late June. The steam hissed. Someone cleared his throat. No one left and no one came on the bare platform. What I saw was Adelstrop. Only the name. And willows, willow herb and grass, and meadowsweet and haycocks dry. No whit less still and lonely fair than the high cloudlets in the sky. And for that minute, a blackbird sang close by, and round him, mistier, farther and farther, all the birds of Oxfordshire and Gloucestershire.
This is by Maya Angelou about a caged bird. It's wonderful, her image of captivity and freedom. The free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends, and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade wings soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn, and he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on a nightmare scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but longed for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
Sorry, I'm going to do one more because poetry is not normally associated with anger. This poem is an angry poem, but it can still be very beautiful. And it's written by Dylan Thomas, and he wrote it when his father died blind. He was blind. And Dylan Thomas could never get over this. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learn too late they grieved it on its way. Do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death, who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.
Can I now welcome Helen Fielding, who I think is coming to join us. And she's also going to share some of her favourite poems with us. I'm sure you all know who Helen is, creator of the legendary Bridget Jones. The only thing I'd say about Helen is that she's also a great supporter of Save the Children and has been involved with them for a very long time. And indeed, her first novel was set in a refugee camp in Africa. I highly recommend it. Helen.
Thank you. Well, it's very nice to be here and celebrate this great collection of poems. And it's also very nice that so many people have come, because I always have this slight fear if ever I'm reading that nobody will come. Largely because the first time I ever read from a book, actually only 2 people came. And one of them was someone I used to go out with at school. And then told me that he was gay. So I have been scarred. I'm very interested to hear your story as well. Very touching and inspiring. I actually slightly misunderstood the evening when it first came up and thought that we were hosting a discussion of classical poetry, which simultaneously went to my head and then completely terrified me, because of course I had no idea about classical poetry. I did study English at university, but I somehow missed the classical poetry term, I think because I was having a crush on someone. And the only fact
It was not gay, I hope.
But the only real fact I retained was that Wordsworth's I wandered lonely as a cloud was originally I wandered lonely as a cow. Until his sister Dorothy got hold of it and crossed out cow and put cloud. So a lot of people don't like it. Anyway, classical poetry, here we go. My favourite thing to read is self-help books. And I think that my favourite poems are the poems that function like self-help books. And one of my favourite poems, and actually Bridget Jones's favourite poem, is If by Rudyard Kipling, which I'm not very organised with all my bits of paper here. I read this poem to my children in an effort to knock some sense into them at night. But they look at me rather blankly. And actually Bridget always carried this poem with her, and she had it with her in the second Bridget book, when she was banned into a Thai jail for alleged drug smuggling. And this is what sort of kept her going, apart from the first line, which is, if you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and blaming it on you. And this worried her because she wasn't sure if they still had beheading. Anyway, she escaped. If you can trust yourself, and I hope you're listening, children. When all men doubt you, but make allowance for their doubting too. If you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or being lied about, don't deal in lies, or being hated, don't give way to hating, and yet don't look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to broken, and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose and start again at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk with crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, nor lose the common touch. If neither foes nor loving friends can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son, or a woman, my daughter. And it's about 60 seconds worth of distance run. I'm not really sure about that. It always puts me off a bit. And I also worry about this thing about if you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss. Because Rudyard Kipling was supposed to be sort of in the war in India and stuff. And I always get this idea that you perhaps might have been sitting around on the terrace drinking gin, and it doesn't seem quite right to be putting all his money onto the game of Mahjong or something. But generally, I think it's a very inspiring. Now, we turn to the great poet, John Dryden, an epitaph. Now, this one rather surprised me, because I always thought that John Dryden was quite a literary chap. Epitaph, it says, comes from the Greek word, as we all know, epitaphion, which means a speech at a tomb. It is most often a short verse or phrase written on a headstone over someone's grave. Epitaphs can range from comforting words designed to reassure those who are left behind to descriptions of the person commemorated. And John Dryden wrote, "Here lies my wife, here let her lie, now she's at rest, and so am I." I'm a bit surprised at John Dryden, because it seems a little bit less Dawson to me. I remember the joke he made about how when he got married he realised how annoying his wife was going to be, because she wanted to be in the wedding photos. Clement Freud had a very good epitaph, which was best before the 15th of April 2009, which was the day. But apparently the one he really wanted to use was, "I told you I was ill." Despite me at the door in the house. There's another one, well, this wasn't one that Clement Freud wanted, but overdosed on Viagra, his wife took it very hard. Now we return to the serious world of the literary poem. And this is the poem called Not Waving But Drowning by Stevie Smith, which I've always really identified with. Not that I've ever drowned, but nobody heard him, the dead man, but still he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap, he always loved laughing, and now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him, his heart gave way, they said. Oh, no. It was too cold always, still the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning. And this poem always makes me think of when I wrote Bridget Jones, and I never thought that anyone was going to read it because it was an anonymous column in a newspaper, which I was just writing to get some money to write my first novel, which was about refugees in Africa, which nobody bought. It's a very serious book. But it was quite odd then going on a book tour all over the world and talking to all these women who said they felt like Bridget Jones. And a lot of these were very sort of high-powered, beautiful, thin, successful women. But I think a lot of people in the modern world feel that they're not waving but drowning. And there's always the feeling that people are presenting this sort of front and actually panicking that they're not quite good enough, which frankly I blame on magazines and photoshopping and all that sort of stuff. But anyway, there we are. I don't think Stevie Smith was really thinking about that in 1902 to 71. Necessarily. Right, now Sir Humphrey Davy. I wish I'd done a folder like that. A bit jealous. It's very good when we get to it. Here we go. It's quite short actually, but this is another poem about. I think the poems are very good when you identify with them. Sir Humphrey Davy detested gravy. He lived in the odium of having discovered sodium, and that's the end of the poem. But I do feel for him, because I too discovered recently that sodium is really, really bad for you, and it's just in just like everything, like curry, indeed gravy, bisto. So thus, as we can see, it's very powerful. It speaks to something you yourself. Poetry, as Wordsworth said, is emotion recollected in tranquility. So Humphrey got it there. So, now this one is really good. This is another of my really favourite ones. And this is also Nelson Mandela's favourite poem, apparently. I mean, it might not definitely be, but I've heard. And it's a really good self-help poem. And apparently when he was in prison in Robben Island for 25 years, he used to read it to the other prisoners. Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I thank whatever gods may be for my unconquerable soul. In the fell-clutched circumstance, I have not winced or cried aloud. Under the bludgeonings of chance, my head is bloody but unbowed. Beyond this place of wrath and tears looms but the horror of the shade, and yet the menace of the years finds and shall find me unafraid. It matters not how strait the gate, how charged with punishments scroll. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. I usually apply that poem to some unbelievably petty little dispute I'm having with some other parent at the school gates or something like that. But no, I think it's a great poem. It's a really good that one. And then changing the tone, we turn to Longfellow, H.W. Longfellow, 1807 to 82. I'm actually going to read a slightly amended version of this poem, There Was a Little Girl, which was a version the boys on our school bus used to say, and I hope Longfellow will forgive me. There was a little girl who had a little curl right in the middle of her forehead. When she was good, she was very good indeed. And when she was bad, she was bloody fantastic. Now here's another. To a Friend in Search of Royal Seclusion by Christopher Loeb, 1926 to 2011. When all else fails, try Wales. Poems don't have to be long. Powerful. Fiercely powerful. Now, this is a good one. I always like poems, as you said, which have a line in them which is really famous and you don't know where it came from, and then you read the poem and realise that it came from this. And I think that the line that's famous in this poem, which comes right at the end, is a very crucial sort of romantic line. And I think it's very relevant in the age of texting, romantic texting, because I think people are always, it's quite scary texting. and people are often sending text to people and daring to press the text button, and then fearing what the reaction will be because they've exposed themselves. And obviously, I don't think Yeats necessarily had this world in mind. He was a long time ago. He was Irish, as we know. But here is his poem. And again, I don't think one should put the whole of a poem like this in a text. It would scare someone off. But he wishes for the cloths of heaven. Had I the heavens embroidered cloths, enwrought with golden and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and light and the half-light, I would spread the cloths under your feet, but I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. So I think we should all remember that when we write texts, especially texts from people who fancy us and we don't fancy them. Just remember the law of karma. So this one is... Now this one is the sort of poem that raises an interesting question for debate. And it's also a topical poem. It's called Remember, Remember the 5th of November. And it's anonymous. Remember, remember the 5th of November. Gunpowder, treason and plot. I see no reason why gunpowder treason should ever be forgot. And I think this raises an interesting question because I spent quite a lot of time in America, and people in America can never understand why we celebrate the day when someone tried to blow up the Houses of Parliament and sort of reenact it in a frankly dangerous manner. But anyway, and then talking of Americans, this is the poem that I really, really want to read. The Star Spangled Banner. How many times have we seen people singing the Star Spangled Banner at baseball games and other big American events and realised that nobody actually knows or understands the words of this song? So now we have before us the actual thing in itself, which was written by Francis Scott Key, 1779 to 1843. Best known as the American national anthem, the Star Spangled Banner comes from a poem called Defense of Fort McHenry, written in 1814. Francis Scott Key was a lawyer who witnessed the attack on Fort McHenry in Baltimore by the British Navy in 1812. It proved to be an American victory over the British. Oh, so that's what it's all about. And he was inspired by the sight of the flag that flew above the fort for the duration of the battle. The English composer John Stafford Smith later set the poem to music. Popular on both sides of the Atlantic, but perhaps more on one side than the other, the Star Spangled Banner became the official flag-raising song for the US Navy in 1889 and was made the national anthem by President Hoover in 1931. The original Star Spangled Banner flag had 13 stripes and 13 stars. Over time, as more states were added, the flag changed. The 13 stripes remain. They stand for the original colonies, but there are now 50 stars, which each represent one of the Union states. Now, how many people knew that? So here we go. Let's see if we can understand what it actually means. Shall I sing it? Should I? Oh, I'll start it off singing, just to put us in the mood. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light? I can't sing it, it's too high. What so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight, all the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave, o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Does that make sense? Yeah. Sort of, yeah. On the shore dimly seen through the mists of the deep, where the foe's haughty host in dread silence reposes. What is that which the breeze o'er the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half conceals, half discloses? Can we guess, perhaps? Now it catches the gleam of the morning's first beam, in full glory reflected, now shines in the stream. 'Tis the star-spangled banner. Oh, long may it wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. And where is that band who so vauntingly swore that the havoc of war and the battle's confusion, a home and a country should leave us no more? Their blood has washed out their foul footsteps' pollution. Do they really sing this all the way through? No refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave, and the star-spangled banner in triumph doth wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. Oh, thus be it ever when free men shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must, when our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the star-spangled banner in triumph does wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave. So there we are. I rather hope there'd be sort of 20 verses. One of my favourite ever songs is an Australian sheep shearing song called Click Go the Shears, which actually does have 24 equally incomprehensible verses, but I won't read that out now. What I think about this book in general is that it's a very clever collection of poems, because it has funny ones, sweet ones, classic ones, little known ones, and I think poetry's sort of rather faded from popular culture. I think the nearest thing we get to it now is probably rap music, which I think it's a shame there aren't some rap poems in here, because I think it's the most inventive use of language that we're seeing in modern culture. But it's a shame that we don't.
It's interesting though, when people are going through some emotional creeds, they nearly always write in verse, even if they don't know it. They do.
Yeah, that's probably true, isn't it?
If they're in love, or if they're very, very sad, they find themselves writing poetry. It's a natural thing to do. Mm-hmm. Anyway.
Well, I suppose songs are the modern
exactly,
pop songs are the modern version of poems, aren't they? Well, in the end, I think I had to read the first poem that I really liked. And I think at that point, what I liked most about poems was that they rhymed and scanned. And I think, although poems don't have to rhyme, it's nice when they do. So, this is The Frog by Hilaire Belloc, which was my first favourite poem. Be kind and tender to the frog, and do not call him names. Slimy skin, or pollywog, or likewise ugly James, or capybrin, or toad gone wrong, or Billy bandy knees. The frog is justly sensitive to epithets like these. No animal will more repay a treatment kind and fair. At least so lowly people say who keep a frog, and by the way, they are extremely rare.
Thank you very much. I'd never thought that I'd hear the Star-Spangled Banner read in the style of Dr. Seuss, but now I really understand it. I was moved to tears, Isla, by what you said about learning to read. And you made me feel that you've done my job for me, because I was going to talk about VRH and what it does. But what it does is help people who don't have teachers or classmates quite as kind as Isla's. Volunteers go into the schools and they read with children who don't get read to at home, don't have anybody to read with. And it's a very inexpensive charity, and it works. It is probably in a school near you. It's certainly in schools near us, and we want to get more volunteers. Now, I'm here to puff the festival as well. We've got another week ahead of us. If you want to come back, please go to our website and come to hear Andrew Miller, who's talking about his Cost of Winning book, Pure. He'll be here next week. And also Kate Summerscale, who'll be talking about, not The Suspicions of Mr. Witcher, but the other one. Yes, that's the one. It's one about sex and Victorians, and it's very, very good. And she'll be talking to Louisa Young, who's also a local writer. But as far as I'm concerned, this evening for me has been a revelation, and I hope it has been for everybody else. I didn't expect to hear so much poetry read so well. I didn't expect to laugh, or to be moved, or to listen with all my ears. And I certainly didn't expect to wish it not to end. But on that note, I want, can you all thank Rachel and the actors and Helen. Buy their books. That was a very important thing. Isla's book is for sale, and so is Rachel and Allie's, and they're here at the back of the room.
My book's going, the proceeds are going to the
The
charity.
proceeds entirely going to charity, so obviously you have to buy Isla's first. But there are only several copies. And now you can renew the applause.